This is the S&P 500 E-mini futures chart, and so we'll just do a quick update here. In blue, we're looking at the 2-month-long cycle. In yellow, this is the monthly cycle. I've talked about many times how I don't really use this all that much. I have gone back and adjusted the length of this cycle. In previous videos, I believe it was about 25 days. I have adjusted this to now 35 days. Actually, I think it's 34 days over here and over here, I believe. But that is something that I do somewhat regularly, is I will go reassess. I'll basically just hide the drawings and go back in and reassess the cycle lengths without trying to let the current cycle lengths that I have on the page give me any type of bias. And I do that because the cycle lengths do vary at times, which I have discussed. They're generally just averages, and sometimes those averages increase a little, and sometimes they decrease, and sometimes they go back and forth. And at this point in time, it does appear that roughly a 35-day, month-long cycle has been somewhat relevant in recent cycles. You can see I've gone back, and so I've put these back for the last few months. I did not change them further back in the past because I think the shorter cycle worked better, but you can see here this is pretty good. This is pretty good, and again, these are the yellow month-long cycles. This one is pretty spot on, and now here we have another one which lines up reasonably well with the 2-week-long cycles as well, and we bounced perfectly out of that trough here. Going forward, we are moving towards the end of the 2-month cycle, so I'm not sure exactly how much bullishness I expect, but we're going to look at some individual charts which would suggest there might be some pretty good bullishness in the near future. This is the Apple daily chart, and I know this chart looks extremely busy right now, but let's focus on the blue 2-month cycles, the yellow 1-month cycles, which again, on this chart, just like on the S&P 500 chart, I'm not a huge fan of the 1-month cycles. As you can see, this is pretty short, as was the prior 1-month cycle. The actual drawing itself is at 34 days, but this cycle came in at 25 days. This cycle came in at 31 days. These are just averages, and again, I'm not a huge fan of those. I prefer the 2-week cycles and the 2-month cycles here. But you can see I have a number of median line sets on here. I'll zoom out for a moment. We have a much longer term median line set, beginning from a much longer cycle here in pink, and we have reached the upper warning line. We actually overthrew it. We came back towards the median line. We actually underthrew that, bounced back up when we found the trough of the 2-month cycle, and now you can see we have from cycle to cycle, as I've discussed in prior videos. That's how I like to identify the pivots for the median lines. We have nearly achieved it. That's close enough to say we did achieve that median line. And now right on time for both the second 2-week cycle in this 2-month cycle as well as the 1-month cycle, we are finding support at the lower warning line. So this gives a good short-term opportunity to go long, and I say short-term because again, just like the S&P 500 chart, we are starting to approach the end of the 2-month-long cycle here. That doesn't mean we're going to roll over immediately. I do expect we will actually break above this upper warning line here. There's no reason to believe yet that this is a valid median line. I just have this here, this downward facing median line set. In the event that we do break below this lower warning line, obviously then the long idea is invalid, and that would suggest we are going to move down further into this 2-month cycle trough. With that said, all long positions that I'm putting on at this time are short term, and I do intend on closing them prior to the Fed's rate decision on the 18th. If you like the video so far, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. This is the CAT daily chart. I had discussed this a while back in July, where I was going long for this move right here. It worked out pretty well. I made a good profit on the short-term play, but the long-term calls and call spreads, I made a very small amount. This chart gives a good lesson as to not only why I went long. I had discussed comparing it with prior cycles, but it also provides a good lesson as to why I closed this position. So in that prior video, I had discussed how I was looking at all of the prior second orange cycles in what I believed to be the first 2-month cycle, blue cycle. So originally I had this over here, and I had this longer term pink cycle over here as well. And so I had discussed my expectations based on the first trough going into the second orange cycle of these longer term cycles. And in all of those, and if we go take a look at those right now, we'll see one here, big move up, and that big move up goes late into that orange cycle. The same thing happens here, big move up, and then there really is no pullback here at the end of this or during this orange cycle, the second orange cycle in the longer term pink cycle here. And I don't have the cycles on here, but as I discussed in that video, it would have been right here, and it would have been the same thing, big move up and almost no pullback during that move. However, if you look at the way this played out, and we got a very good candle here that gave us a huge warning. It's this candle right here. It started off big and green, exactly how we expected it, and then put in this massive rejection here. And so on the following day, I closed out my short-term long positions, still for a pretty good profit. I did, however, leave the longer-term positions open, and I regretted that decision all the way down here. And this, again, is nothing like we saw in any of those prior cycles. So just like I was looking at the prior cycles to see what the expectation should be as far as how I should structure those options for this trade, well, we use that same type of analysis to determine when we might see something different if we should potentially close it. And so again, I closed the short-term options here for a pretty good profit. I held the long-term options all the way down through here. After we got this candle, I was a little hopeful that the long-term options might still kind of work out, but after we put in this bearish engulfing candle, it's not quite an engulfing candle, after this bounce here, that suggested that, well, we were probably still moving towards the trough here in this cycle, and we would probably take out this low. So I closed the long-term positions at the open on this candle, and that was only for a very tiny, really almost nothing, but a very tiny profit on those as well. And then that expectation of taking out this trough was met as we moved down into the trough of this orange cycle. What I did not expect was for us to take out both of these lows, because again, I had thought this bottom was in. And I do believe I mentioned in that video, the video when I was looking at this long, I had wished this trough came much closer to this lower warning line. It has now done so, and we are putting in a higher orange cycle trough here. And so I shifted this over. It could go here and this is early, or it could go here and this is late, meaning this cycle would be late. Either way is fine, but what's happening now is we've had a nice bounce out of here, and we are, while this trough is late, we bounced right off of this lower warning line. So just like with Apple, I have a short-term long that I put on at today's open that I also intend on closing before the Fed's rate decision. And in the meantime, I have also actually moved this over as well. So I know this video is much shorter than some of my videos have been in the past. Unfortunately, I have a lot less time right now to make these videos. So I think what I'll end up doing is maybe during the week, I'll probably just review one or maybe two charts. That way I can go into a little more detail and make the analysis a little more clear and discuss my thought process on a lot of these, rather than try to cover multiple charts but give less detail and less quality information. I'd rather give more quality information on fewer charts than a more shotgun approach. I actually will take a moment here just to cover the Bitcoin chart really quickly, because this is actually also at a very interesting inflection point where we have some longer term cycles. I do believe this very long-term cycle here has troughed here. So it did come in a cycle late, I believe, based on the next lower time frame cycles. And we have just, it's a bit early, but it appears as if we are putting in a lower time frame, this orange cycle here. a lower time frame trough here. This is on the log chart, by the way. I've discussed this in prior videos, as well as the length of these cycles in prior videos. I'm not going to cover that right now, but we are bouncing right off of a couple of different lower warning lines. I think the more important warning line or median line set is actually the modified shift here, and so we'll click on that. And as I said a moment ago, that is using a prior cycle trough, the prior cycle peak, and then the initial trough of what I believe to be the current longer cycle here. And so that gives us this median line here. And the standard set, which is using the same pivots, it's in yellow, and it gives a slightly steeper median line. They are both moving towards this upper warning line, which I've discussed in prior videos, that I do expect we will achieve, which is around 100K, a little more than 100K. And we can definitely come up a little short. We can definitely overthrow it as well, which is something Bitcoin often does. But I do think as long as the market doesn't tank hard after the Fed's rate decision, I do believe we'll probably have a bit of a blow off top that kind of comes up to this area before we roll over. Okay, so again, I do intend on kind of changing the format a little bit of these videos, as well as putting out some more educational type videos in the near future for how to go about identifying these time cycles, how to properly use the median lines, as well as a few other tools that I like to use to help confirm the validity of troughs, of peaks, and of these time cycles and how to use them in general. As always, thank you for watching this video, and be sure to subscribe for more.